every fissure and fold of American society. And that once isn't so very long ago, a generation or two, depending on how that imprecise term is understood. Until recently, for Black Americans, almost every part of life was governed by Jim Crow's humiliations. For white Americans, enormous chunks of life and of wealth went into maintaining the delicate, brutal, intense business of control. We should not forget where we once were in such business, and how we got there, and how we ended it. And then the why. This is my 8th book on social institutions, but it's the first time I've written about my own country's civil rights history. At the outset, I'll admit that this story is not about the good in America, but about the bad. It is, in fact, a book about the worst of our country's memories. I hope, of course, that writing about Jim Crow directs light on this dark corner of our past. My intent is not to try to explain every kind of racism, or to analyze the merits of affirmative action or of racial reparations that have in large part been the legacy of Jim Crow. But I don't think we should forget what Jim Crow did, and how far we've come since these events transpired, or even how it was that restrooms once came in threes. For reasons I'll soon try hard to satisfactorily explain, this is, in the main, a Southern story. So I went to the South to research it, traveling by Greyhound through the region whose pulse was, until the end of the mid-1960s, taken by the beat of Jim Crow. My first thanks go to my fellow Greyhound passengers, largely African American, who told me of their own memories of life in the Jim Crow South, or perhaps more often, what their parents or grandparents had told them about those days. My thanks, too, to the young ones, who said they didn't know what the term Jim Crow meant, which in itself told me something I needed to know. And a few special thanks by name, all to people who helped me with kindnesses and advice, but none of whom, of course, bears the slightest responsibility for whatever errors or misinterpretations I've made.
Janice White Sykes, at the African American Research Branch of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library.
The Reverend Willie Rogers Sr. at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Mary Glenn Hearn at the Nashville Room of the Public Library of Nashville in Davidson County. Janie Morris at the Duke University Library in Durham. Two ladies of Reston, Virginia, Thelma Calvert and Bernice Tate. Johnny Carr in Montgomery. John Egerton in Nashville. Mississippi Assistant Attorney General Jim Frazier in Jackson. Former Governor William Winter in Jackson. Professor David Gochman in Louisville. Professor Mills Thornton of the University of Michigan in Montgomery. Professor Charles Reagan Wilson at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. My thanks go to my editor at St. Martin's, Charles Spicer, without whose confidence the book wouldn't have happened, and whose encouragement lifted me. And thanks, too, to my literary agent, Natasha Kern, who said yes from the beginning. Prologue. Coming Home. Wendell Tandy didn't exist in flesh and blood, but, as a metaphor, was as real as the Jim Crow he faced. What happened to Wendell was similar to what thousands of African Americans endured, servicemen and servicewomen who, in countries not their own, fought a war against racism, only to return to the same scourge at home. It was December 1945, and the United States Army of Occupation in Berlin was sending Wendell Tandy back to Mississippi. For 18 months, First Lieutenant Wendell Lawrence Tandy III had served his country and had done so with notable valor. With so much valor, in fact, the Army had given him a Distinguished Service Medal for obliterating a German tank in a maneuver his commanding officer had, in the award citation, described as heroic and damn near suicidal. Wendell had also picked up a Purple Heart in tribute to the meatball-sized chunk of bone and gristle one of the Panzer's smaller guns had blown out of his left thigh. The slender and soft-spoken infantry officer had begun the last 18 months of his Army life by facing a cataract of German artillery shells, hurled at him across Normandy's Omaha Beach. That ordeal was succeeded by a bloodily fought slog through France and Belgium and Germany, Hitler's 1,000-year empire breathing its last as the exhausted unit crawled through sniper fire in Leipzig.